When working on music lately, I've been mainly focused on sound design and recording samples from my modular systems. In particular, I'm planning to sell most or all of my tip-top 808 and 909 drum modules, so I've been extensively sampling them first. I've already recorded and released a raw one-shots archive, as well as my first pack of heavily processed loops from the tip-top drum modules. These sample packs, as well as others, are available on my Patreon. I mentioned in my studio tour video that I haven't had all of my modular systems powered up and ready to go simultaneously for quite some time. This is because I've moved towards project-based workflows and setups instead of a single monolithic studio configuration. However, this particular project benefits hugely from having all of my Eurorack systems set up and ready for cross-patching, as each system has its own distinct collection of sound processing and modulation available. My main case is basically still just the Iteration 1 setup, with a handful of modules subtracted. The main audio processing modules that I've been using from this case are the Modcan Dual Phaser and Dual Frequency Shifter. In my small case, I have the Metasonics RK4, which is excellent for sound processing, and in this case I also have the Zorlon Canon Mark II, which is very, very useful for quickly generating different rhythms and stepped modulation. The Studio Rack currently has all of the tip-top drum modules in it, as well as the Expert Sleepers modules that are clocking everything and providing the additional occasional modulation source. The audio processing module that I've been using the most in this rack is the WMD Micro Hadron Collider. It has a very distinct character as the resonance is very unstable. It can sometimes be a bit frustrating for typical filter use cases, but it's very interesting for sound design and exploration. My other big case contains a variety of modules for generating rhythms in a modular way, as well as a few useful filters, including the tip-top Z2040 and IntelliGel Chorgasmatron. There are also a couple of very strange filters in the Synchrodyne and Synchrodyne Expander. And another notable module in this case is the WMD Multimode Envelope, which offers considerable control over envelope shape and can be incredibly snappy. Since I temporarily moved my studio rack away from the corner, it was hard to access my main cable hanger, so I used this mic stand as a backup. Having the ability to hang cables is very important for these kinds of sessions where I tend to do a lot of repatching. And for these patching sessions, having a can of deoxit around is essential. There are always some dirty jacks and cables lurking somewhere, or some scratchy pots. The steel wool is useful for more stubborn oxidation, mainly for cables that have sat out for a long time. Since I tend to use Ableton Live only for very basic tasks these days, I'm still using an old version. I'm using the Silent Way plugin suite to generate all my CV signals. Because I'm sending out to an ES3 on ADAT, and I'm running at 96 kHz, I'm using the SMUX plugin on its own track with the channel controls flipped. This track feeds the third and fourth input on the SMUX channel and contains the 8CV combiner plugin and the ES5 controller plugin. Because of some limitations with how Ableton deals with inputs and outputs on VSTs and the number of different settings and channels involved, getting this all to work smoothly is a bit convoluted. The next two tracks hold MIDI clips prepared with the MIDI notes that are mapped to the gate outputs on my ES5 and ESX 8 gate. I set up these MIDI tracks just in case I wanted to easily utilize all my gate outputs. But so far, I've mostly generated gates in another way that we'll get to shortly. The next two channels are Silent Way LFOs that come out of the first four outputs of the ESX 8CV. Right now, I'm using these in a fairly basic way, and I only sometimes patch them up because it's annoying to go back and forth between working on the modular and using the computer. In some hybrid setups in the past, I've used MIDI controllers mapped to Silent Way plugins, which can help ease some of that frustration. I was going for more of a quick and dirty approach here. The next two channels, which send signals to the bottom four outputs of the ESX 8CV, have a Silent Way step LFO, which is essentially a tricked-out modular step sequencer. LFOs and step LFOs that are synchronized will only generate signals when the transport is running. The left channel of each step LFO has random generation enabled, and I've limited the output values so they're generating random gates. The next 3 channels utilize the step LFO to send clock signals to the ESX8 gate. There are many ways to send clock signals with Silent Way. I just tend to find this one to be fairly quick and easy to set up. The first step LFO plugin is responsible for 32nd and 16th note clocks, and I am also generating 8th, quarter, half, and whole note clocks. I'm not bothering to send a reset signal. A big part of trimming and curating the loops is about manually determining the phrasing. Sometimes I'll just send out a bunch of random gates, hoping that in the middle of the chaos lies an interesting phrase I can just pluck out of there. I often prefer to use Session View to organize this type of loop recording workflow, and it's common for me to record continuously for up to 20 or 30 minutes at a time. Session View allows me to keep my clips neatly organized and easily jump around to different parts of very long recordings to see where the good stuff might be. And that's why I've left warp mode enabled on these clips. I also use Session View for this so that when I change Ableton's tempo to record loops at different tempos, I don't have to worry about the arrangement view timeline expanding or contracting and messing up my clip organization. Having the computer clock everything makes it very easy to know the tempos of all the recordings, since Ableton saves tempo information in the clip. And also, having everything synced up makes it much easier to just drag loop markers around a clip looking for the good stuff. After I get a bunch of recordings I want to go through, I typically do rough selection and trimming in Session View, and then move the subclips into Arrangement View for more detailed trimming and sample export. While recording, I do a variety of tweaking and patching, but if there is a significant amount of new connections I want to make, I tend to take a break from recording to build up the patch. Amazing recordings and samples can be made from very simple patches, though. Having all my Eurorack available and ready to go for this project is less about patch complexity and more about access to flavors or dynamics that only certain modules and combinations of modules can offer. Now it's time to take a listen to some random bits of these modular mudpies.